Game development explained. No theory, just what works.
Let's talk about something that sounds super simple, but is honestly one of the most powerful tools a creative team has. I'm talking about observation. Yeah, it sounds basic, but trust me, it could be the one thing that unlocks those huge problems you've been stuck on.
You know this feeling, right? You're in that meeting. Again. The one that feels like you've had it a dozen times already. Somebody says the onboarding is totally clear. Someone else pipes up, no, the pacing is all wrong. And the thing is, everyone's got a pretty good point. Everyone has an argument. But you walk out of the room and nothing, absolutely nothing is actually resolved.
Well, that endless, super expensive loop of debate, it has a name. It's called an opinion cycle. And yeah, it's basically where your time, your money, and your team's morale just go to die. But here's the good news. There is a way to break out of it. So let's get real. What does this debate that never ends actually look like day to day? Well, it's when your team gets completely bogged down in these subjective arguments. You know, is the tutorial confusing? Is that difficulty spike way too high? Everybody has an opinion, and they'll pull out like one comment from a playtester or a single message from Discord to back it up. The project might inch forward a little, but that core disagreement, it just hangs around forever. The solution, the thing that cuts right through all that noise, is the O step in the action framework. It's all about observation.
Okay, so this brings us to the whole point of this. We're not just watching for fun. We're collecting evidence that actually genuinely changes decisions.
See, observation isn't just, passively watching people. It's a very specific habit. You're collecting evidence with one goal in mind, to shut down the debate and get everyone on the same page about what is actually happening. I mean, think about it. Your team knows your project inside and out, right? You know all the little workarounds, you know the intention behind every feature, but then a brand new player comes in with zero context. And what happens? They get confused. They miss the signals you thought were so obvious. They quit in places you'd never ever expect. Observation is the tool you use to bridge that massive gap.
Now, to get a really good picture of what's going on, you can't just rely on one thing. A single comment could just be an outlier, right? And a single metric can hide a ton of important details. So real observation works best when you combine 3 different channels to get a strong, reliable signal. First up, you've got build reviews. These are just quick walkthroughs to spot friction and confusion super early. Then you have playtests. This is where you watch what players actually do, their behavior, not just what they say. And third, you've got the signals. This is stuff like your metrics, support tickets, the data that helps you validate what you're seeing.
Okay, so you've got all this info coming in from these channels. Awesome. But how do you stop it from just becoming this giant, overwhelming pile of notes that nobody ever looks at again? You need a system, and that's where the 5-3-1 observation rule comes in. It's a game changer. The real magic of this rule is how simple it is. But don't let that fool you. The structure is super strict for a reason. It's all about protecting your team's focus. Here's how it works. You start with 5 verifiable, totally factual observations. From those 5 facts, you boil them down to 3 likely implications, and from those 3 implications, you make one single concrete decision about what to do next. See, it's a system that's literally designed to force clarity. And this right here, this is probably the most important mental shift you have to make. The tutorial is confusing. What is that? It's an opinion. You can argue with it all day, but what about this? The player stopped moving for 12 seconds right after the tutorial prompt appeared. That is a verifiable fact. You can't debate it. You can just go watch the recording and see it for yourself. This is how you end arguments. Here are a couple more examples of what a really strong factual observation sounds like. Just notice how specific and, undeniable they are. The player repeated the same failed action 5 times. They quit on the very first failure with no attempt to recover. These aren't suggestions or opinions. This is cold, hard evidence. All right, let's look at how this plays out in the real world. Here's a case study about that impossible debate teams always have. Is it fun? So this team had a really solid build, but they were just stuck. Every single week, the same argument about the game's onboarding would pop up. One half of the room said it was fine, the other half said it completely failed to communicate the goals. And look, every argument sounded totally reasonable, but here's the catch. They were all based on the team's own internal experience. So what did they do? They ran a playtest and just watched the first 10 minutes together. And this is what they wrote down. 5 undeniable observations. Players hesitated. They missed critical UI changes. They tried to brute force an interaction. They had no clue how to recover after failing. Suddenly, These weren't opinions anymore. They were just behaviors you could see happening right there on the screen. And from those solid facts, they pulled out a really powerful implication. And here was the big aha moment. The game was trying to communicate its intent in the places the team expected players to look, not where players were actually looking. That's a huge, huge disconnect.
So that led them to one single, actionable decision. No more vague debates about fun. They decided to redesign the first 10 minutes around a confirmation loop. They cut down the number of new concepts, they added much better feedback, and they moved a key tutorial element. It was specific, somebody owned it, and it had a deadline.
And the result? It was pretty much immediate. The debate just vanished. Poof! Gone. The next build of the game worked way better, players were actually recovering from failure, and the entire culture of the team started to shift. They stopped arguing about what's fun and started observing how to create it.
All right, so this all sounds great, but how do you actually put it into practice yourself? And maybe more importantly, avoid the common traps? Because, let's be honest, observation can definitely go wrong. It can easily turn into a giant wish list of features, or, that one really loud, angry comment can totally distract everyone from a much more common but quieter problem. And maybe worst of all, you can gather all this amazing evidence and then just fail to make a decision.
But the fix for pretty much all of these failure modes, it's that 5-3-1 structure. It forces you to stay laser-focused on the facts, to find the real signal in all the noise, and, this is the most important part, it forces you to end with a concrete decision. Look, if you want to try this out, you don't need some huge, complicated new process. Here's a super simple experiment you can run this week. Just pick one 10-minute slice of whatever you're working on. Get one person to go through it and just watch the recording. Then, use that 5-3-1 structure to write down what you saw. And finally, make one decision and just do it. That's it. Simple. Because that, right there, is the quiet power of observation. It doesn't really require more effort, just a different kind of focus. And what you get in return is something that's so valuable, something you can't just buy with more money or more time. You get clarity. So as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one question to chew on. Think about your own work, your own team. What is the one recurring, endless, frustrating debate that you can finally put to bed this week just by watching?
If this is useful, subscribe.
New breakdowns every week.